Hey, I'm Cameron and I wanted to throw together a quick video on Lambda versioning and aliases. I encountered an issue when I developed my first Alexa skill, and I noticed other developers have ran into the same issue, and that is once you've published and certified your skill and it's live, how do you update your development code, your Lambda, without affecting your live skill? I've heard and seen several approaches to this, but something that I incorporated and learned about is Lambda versioning and aliases, and I wanted to throw together a quick tutorial to show you how I use that. I have created a new Alexa skill using the Ask CLI and pushed out a new skill here. It is the default Hello World skill, but I've named it Lambda Alias Demo. And this is the default skill configuration here. I have not changed anything with this. And then here is the default Lambda code for the Hello World skill. Looking down here, this is the default Hello World application with the launch request where it says, "Welcome to Alexa Skills Kit, you can say hello." Now, any code that you may update either through the developer console or through your editor and using the Ask CLI to deploy, all of that code gets pushed into this ARN resource up here, the latest default resource. It's either referred to as the default or in some cases the latest. So anytime you deploy code, it goes here. The problem is if you build a skill and you go through, you leave the default settings set as they are, you develop your skill, you certify the skill. Let's head over to this developer console. This is the skill. You build it out, you test it, you go through the certification process. It gets pushed to live and is accepted. The problem is if you have not incorporated versioning or aliases, your skill has probably gotten locked into, if you look at the endpoint, it gets locked into your default Lambda, your latest version of code. When skill goes live, all the configuration in this endpoint is locked. You can't change this unless you go through a recertification process. So the problem with this is if you have not changed this and then you go to further develop your Lambda code, it is affecting your live skill. So it's not only edited in the development version, but also in the live version. So what I do, and I learned about, it took a little reading and learning, but I have incorporated Lambda versioning and aliases. So we have our default code here, and say that I was developing a skill. I'm happy with it. I'm ready to kind of deploy this out as certification. I've tested it, it's all good, whatnot. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go up to actions and I'm going to publish a new version. And I just need to give it a description. I will call this 1.0 initial release. And I click publish. When I do that, if I scroll down to my code editor down here, I will notice that it says code editing is only available for the latest version. So when I create this version, it creates a snapshot of it. It freezes it. I can see the code, but I can't edit any of this code. So it locks this code in place. I also noticed that my ARN up here has changed, and I've got a default :1 up here, so I have a slightly different ARN resource. Now, when you do publish a new version, one thing that you need to do is you need to click over here and redefine your Alexa Skills Kit trigger. And then you also need to pass in your skill ID down here. I'm going to go over to the developer console, grab the skill ID, paste that in there, add, and save. And now I have a version 1 of my skill published. Now that I have a version 1, I've got this locked into place. I want to show something. I'm going to switch from my version 1. I click on this drop down and I can go to the latest version. And I'm going to scroll down here, and I want to make an update to the launch response here. And I want to say, welcome to the version 2 of the Alexa Skills Kit. I'm going to save this. Now, initially, if we would have built a skill and certified it as is without introducing versioning or aliases, our code would have pointed to this default ARN up here. If we go back over to this, so this is still, I have not edited anything here, so this is the default ARN. If I go to test this, and assuming that I had already certified this and this was the live version locked in, if I open Greeter.
Welcome to version 2 of the Alexa Skills Kit. You can say hello.
It is pointing to my updated code, so any of the code that I'm updating on the back end is affecting my live version. Now, however, if I would have introduced versioning, so I've got this version 1 of my skill, I could do two things here. I could use this ARN here that is linked to my version 1 of my skill. I could copy that in. I could go over to my skill and I could change the endpoint to what I wanted to be the V1 of my skill. I'm going to save my endpoint. And now if I test this,
Welcome to the Alexa Skills Kit. You can say hello.
I am back to my V1 version of my skill. Now, I could publish this and it would be locked in to the version 1 of my Lambda code, but if it got certified, it's locked at this endpoint. I can't change that. I can't update that because I can't go into my Lambda code and update the version 1 of this skill. But what I can do is I can set up an alias. I'm going to go back to my Lambda code here, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go up to actions and I'm going to create an alias. I want to name this prod. And it's going to ask me a version that I want to associate to prod. And right now I'm going to say version 1. I will create that. And again, I'm going to have to click and set up my Alexa Skills Kit trigger. So I'm going to click on that. I will hop back over here, grab my skill ID. I will come down. I will paste that in, add it, and save it. Once I've set up this alias, I now have a new ARN that is pointed to prod, which this ARN is actually pointed to version 1. If I click on my Lambda up here, prod is associated to version 1 of my skill, or version 1 of my Lambda. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to replace this, and I will save this endpoint. And at this point, if I would have copied this in right before certification, say the skill gets approved, it goes live, it's locked in here. This prod is locked in. I cannot change this. Let's go ahead and test it.
Welcome to the Alexa Skills Kit. You can say hello.
So I have my version 1 of my greeting. However, like I said, I cannot edit this ARN because it is locked into my endpoint. However, I can go into my Lambda console and I can point this to a new version. I can associate on the fly without recertification. I can associate this to a different version of my Lambda. So I want to go to, I'm going to switch from my prod alias to my latest version. This was the second version of my code. Welcome to V2 of the Alexa Skills Kit. So this is my testing. I feel that that's pretty good. I want to go ahead and I want to publish this as a new version. And I will call this V2.0. Publish that. And again, I'm going to have to click on my Alexa Skills Kit as a trigger. Hop over, copy my ID. Paste that in. Add. Save. So now I have version 2. But what I want to do is I want to hop back over to my aliases. I can select my prod alias. I can come down and say, I've developed my code enough that I want to change my prod from version 1. I want to point it to version 2. I can click save. I'll hop back over to the developer console and my skill. This is still certified live. It's pointing to the same ARN. But now if I test it, instead of getting the initial greeting, if I open Greeter, it should present the version 2 of my greeting.
Welcome to version 2 of the Alexa Skills Kit. You can say hello.
So now you can have your live skill pointed to an alias, and you can change that alias on the fly. Now something else that I've done is right before I go to certify a skill, I will change the endpoint to a prod endpoint. But once that skill is approved and it's out there as a live skill, you see two different skills in your developer console. You see the live skill, which is immutable and it's locked, you can't change anything. And then you see the developer version of your skill. Once that's gone through the live process, I change this back to a different alias. I go back in and I have a second alias that I create. And I'm going to create a new alias and I will call this testing. And for this purposes, I'm going to point testing to version 2 of the Lambda. And one last time, I'm going to have to configure my Alexa Skills Kit. I'll go back and grab my ID. I will paste my ID in, save it. I'm gonna, for the sake of demonstration, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna take prod and say maybe I find an issue in my V2 and I need to roll back prod. So there's an issue that something slipped by my testing, and so I need to roll that back. So I can go from version 2 back to version 1, click save, and because that prod endpoint is saved here, still haven't changed this. I can go back in and test now, and it should be back to our original greeting.
Welcome to the Alexa Skills Kit. You can say hello.
So this is my live version, and I just changed the alias to point back to version 1. Now, that's my live version. In my developer console, in the developer version, I end up pointing that over. Once it gets certified, I change the endpoint, and I will go to the testing alias, grab this alias for testing, I will paste that into my developer version of the skill, save the endpoints, and so now that should be pointed to version 2.
Welcome to version 2 of the Alexa Skills Kit. You can say hello.
So we have prod at version 1, the live version locked in at version 1. We have the development version pointing to a testing alias, which is linked to version 2. And then I can hop back over here. I can go to my latest version. I can switch that. And I can make this, my development, I'm introducing new features, new code. It hasn't quite been tested yet. I'm going to save that. And I can set up a testing in here in the Lambda console. And let's do session started. This is my launch request. So now I can test this in here. I can test my development version here. And we are getting the version 3 of the code. And then my development version of the skill is pointed to a testing alias, which is V2 of the skill. And the live certified is pointing to a prod alias, which is linked to version 1 of the skill. So this is kind of how I roll with my development. It does make it quite easy to change on the fly. So hopefully this has helped out. I know that the Amazon documentation, I think that is a little complex. It was kind of hard to understand. I watched some videos and I learned this, and I like it. I think it's easy. Once you get used to it, it's pretty easy to adopt. So let me know what you think. Thanks.